Brexit has raised its head again this week in a very strong manner. Speeches by Barnier, who actually explains the position of the EU bargaining nations, the 27. David Davis, who doesn't explain the UK's position. And of course by former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who, in my opinion, quite rightly, explains the position of the United Kingdom and what the harm Brexit can do to the nation. But I think one of the things that we don't explain enough to the common man, if you will, to the man on the omnibus, is what Brexit means for them. Let's forget the arguments for now that we talk about in terms of wide open pastures for us after we leave the European Union. That another argument that says we can't get the best deals for the United Kingdom because we're hampered by the EU. Let's just answer that first, and then let's move on to other issues. Firstly, of the top 100 companies in the world, that is, the companies that earn over 25 billion a year, in the top 30, 7 are German. In fact, in the top 10, Germany has the third company, which happens to be VW. And if you drop down, again, within the top 20, they've got another 5 companies. So that means that Germany doesn't appear to be hampered by the EU. And if you look in those top 30, you'll also find Italian companies, French companies, even a Luxembourg company. What you won't find is a British company. In fact, you've got to wait till the 76th country, until you get the first British company, which is GlaxoSmithKline. So all the way down to the 76th company in the world is where you find the first British company. Other EU countries have their companies way higher, as I've just explained. So clearly, the fact that one is in the EU doesn't stop you from being a major player and selling your goods around the world. In my time, I've been probably to at least half, if not 3/4 of the countries in the world, and I've never not seen German products on sale, French products on sale. So therefore, the EU doesn't prevent anybody from making any money and selling across the world. It would appear that our problem is that we're not manufacturing anything in order to sell it, which brings me on to another point. So now let's start talking about what happens to the average man when we move out of Brexit. The average woman when we move out of Brexit. So let's be realistic. We talk about the British car industry. Actually, what we're talking about is not the British car industry, but foreign car companies manufacturing cars in Britain. First and foremost, of course, you've got the Japanese companies, which, by the way, are the number one companies in the world. So you have Toyota, Nissan, and various others. They all manufacture in Great Britain, but they're not British cars. We then have German cars that are manufactured in Britain. Actually, some German cars people think are British. So, example, Mini, which is BMW, or let's take Rolls-Royce, which is also BMW. Let's take Daimler, which is Mercedes. Even companies outside of the EU own cars that we think are British. A good example of that would be Jaguar, which is owned by Tata, which is an Indian company. Or let's stay on the European angle, VW, which owns various companies, and now Vauxhall, which is owned by a French company. So you see, what you will find is that even when we start talking about Britain manufacturing and how well our industries are doing, they're actually not British industries. That's another factor that's going to be a problem. But of course, they too may be too highbrow for the average person, the average man and woman in the United Kingdom. So let's put it on a lower level still. A level that affects every citizen, that every citizen can understand. And I question why this was not explained to them. First and foremost, every British citizen was a citizen also of the European Union, which meant that every British citizen could go and live in any of the other 27 EU countries. I will say to you right now, there probably isn't a British family, and I'm saying it again, there probably isn't a single British family that doesn't have somebody who lives in an EU country. Now, we always talk about there being 3 million, 3.5 million EU citizens sitting in Britain and 1 million citizens from the UK sitting in the EU countries. I will tell you that if you go to Spain alone, there's more than 1 million Brits in Spain. The point is that most Brits do not register in the southern countries. So in Spain, example, I would suggest that half the Brits are not registered as living there. They live there, but they're not registered as living there. Why? Because there's no advantage in registering. So they live there for 25 years, but don't register properly on the patron, which is something that you're meant to do, because that would mean they'd pay Spanish taxes. But because they have the E11 or the e-hit card, as it's called now, so you can get your medical care free of charge, and the Spanish are not very good at looking at an individual's tax or their background, people just don't register. So that's that. We also know as Brits that you can go to Cyprus, Malta, Greece, southern France, Italy, lesser so to places like Germany, Austria, but nevertheless Brits are there, and you're going to find Brits who live. Now, when they're living in Germany and Austria and Denmark and Holland, yes, Brits register. So there they are registered, because generally those are younger people who have registered and are working there fully, and they have good enforcement systems in those countries. So you register because there's an advantage in it. But there isn't such an advantage if you're living in Spain or in some of the more sunnier climes where many Brits gravitate to, and live there in a quasi-semi-illegal, not illegal because you're an EU citizen, but unregistered status. So now, we're hitting the crux of the matter. So there's many more Brits abroad than we presently think they are, or statistics say they are. Secondly, we travel on holiday to these places. And, as a general rule, many Brits don't bother getting insurance because they know if they take ill, they can just use their e-hit card and they'll get all the health service assistance that they require. That may well go. We use our mobile phones as we wish, now willy-nilly. That may now go if we can't organise that system. We travel there cheaply on Ryanair. The chief of Ryanair has already said that from his perspective, he believes that prices will have to go up. So that may well go. We don't need a visa or anything like that. We don't stand in line to have our passport checked. All that will go if we leave the EU and we are controlling our borders. Then the other 27 countries will control their borders. Much more difficult to travel. We also love, and I mean love, to bring back the wines that we want, copious amounts of wines. In fact, you could bring back a lorry load of wine if you wish, as long as it's for personal use. And people take advantage of that, fill the boot up in France and bring that wine back. That will go, because we're no longer in the customs agreement and no longer in the single market. We bring back meats we like, cheeses we like, different types of food we like, amount en masse. That will go. Customs may start looking at you. Goods that we buy over there, just clothing, anything, books, whatever, that may be now checked with customs. So see, you're now turning the clock back. Now the average man and woman understand what leaving the European Union means. It means that all the stuff that you've now got used to, of just bringing all this stuff back from Europe at a much cheaper price than you get it in the UK, overnight can go. Your drinks, your fags, all that sort of stuff that you take for granted. Living where you want, when you want, working where you want, when you want. So now if you want to work in Europe, you may have to get a visa. Look, the high likelihood is that you will need to get a visa, and you'll have to get a work permit to work in the 27 other countries. These are all the aspects that we're now forgetting. So let's go a little bit further. Let's dig deeper. Let's dig into reality. So half of the legislation that there is on, for example, working time directives and other issues like that, EU legislation. Now I know that we say under our laws that we're going to bring these laws wholesale into the UK. But are we? Tory ministers have definitely said some of this red tape is no good and should go. So what regs will be brought in and what regs will be kept out? We also don't seem to understand, from my perspective, of how closely we work together in secret intelligence and law enforcement and security and counter-terrorism. Right now it's relatively close, in fact very close in many ways. But when you're a competitor, that closeness will begin to spin away. What was given as an acceptance and as a knowledge that we would work close together and information will be provided, we're not in the Schengen Agreement. Because you see, one of the things that we need to understand is Britain had many, many opt-outs. More opt-outs than, frankly, any other country within the European Union. One of them was for Schengen. So that's why recently, when one of the terrorists we unfortunately had the problem of having on our streets of killing individuals when he lived in Italy, that individual, if we were part of the Schengen Agreement, would have been flagged up automatically to the United Kingdom. Because we chose not to be part of the Schengen Agreement, that was not automatically highlighted to us. Although, because of our close working relationships, if something were to happen, which it has, then the information is easily obtainable. European arrest warrants easily carried through, so we can arrest people in Europe, the European, and then they are extradited to Britain very, very easily, within a matter of days. Not the sometimes years it used to take in years gone by, in time gone by. All of these things are up to be lost. Lost to the United Kingdom. So, for the everyday person in the street, they lose a hell of a lot. In their rights, in their working conditions, in their holidays, in what goods they can buy simply without being checked via customs, in where they can choose to live, when they can choose to live, in their insurance in terms of healthcare when they travel abroad. All lost. None of that was extended to the British people. The car manufacturing companies that are here, which are, as I've just explained, not British cars manufacturers, can choose overnight to say 55 million in Britain to 63 million, depending on whether the Scots stay with us, to 500 million in the European Union. So if you're going to tax me, where am I put tariffs on and tax on, where am I going to manufacture? I'll manufacture in Europe. We already see this happening with our greatest export, the city. We already see that Frankfurt, Luxembourg, frankly, Dublin, and others, and Paris, are grabbing some of these high-rolling, very wealthy individuals from the banking system that presently sits in the city, but is to some extent bound to flood out to other parts of Europe, especially when it comes to exchanges, European exchanges, orientated exchanges. All of this diminishes the United Kingdom economically. But let me just say one thing before I leave. The United Kingdom will also be diminished, is also being diminished geopolitically. Now that might not matter to the person in the street, supposedly. But one of the things I heard quite a lot during the election is we can be great. Well, we won't be great. And I'll tell you why we won't be great. Our greatest and closest ally depended on us to be of import in Europe. That's the United States. It depended on us to pass the US message into Europe, to, if you will, orientate the Europeans towards our way of thinking. And that's been relatively successful. However, with us outside of Europe, the US has no interest for us anymore in that vein. So, three of the main factors that we had going for us, the military strength of the United Kingdom within Europe, will also wane, along with the economic and the geopolitical ones. Why? Not because the UK will lessen its military, but because the European Union will strengthen as a unified military and bring about a European army. The reason that hasn't happened already is because the UK has prevented that. But there's nothing to stop them now. So France will take a stronger line on the military tie up with the Germans, the Poles and others and form a European Union army, which then will be superior to that of the United Kingdom, which again diminishes us geopolitically. Germany, which up to now has been able to hide, if you will, to some extent behind the UK in Europe, because it didn't want to show itself as the main power, which it by far is, by the way, with more than $1 trillion more in GDP than us. We've already shown, by the way, our lack of economic prowess after Brexit. After the vote for Brexit, we haven't even left yet, insofar as we used to be the 5th largest economy in the world, probably about 10 to 50 billion more than the French. Now the French have jumped us. So the French are now the 5th largest economy and we've dropped down to the 6th largest economy. The Germans stay at the 4th with over $1 trillion, 1,000 million dollars more than us per annum in their GDP. Why? Because I've just explained to you before, they sell stuff all over the world. Because they manufacture, whereas we tend not to. Yes, our strength, if you will, lies in service industries. But if we're outside the EU, again, what block do we have pushing worldwide our ideas for service industry prowess? That also lessens. So with our geopolitical strength, lessens our ability to influence the rest of the world for us economically as well as politically. All of this is a result of Brexit. So now we are a country, a small country, sitting outside of the major power bloc of the European Union and also outside of the close ally of the United States, because frankly the United States sees little interest. Interest is probably the wrong word, sees little use, if you will, for us within that bridge to Europe that we were used for previously. They'll now go direct to the Germans directly or via the French, which Macron is already playing for. So I say to you, and this is getting too long, but I think you need to understand, before it's too late, Britons, do not leave the European Union. Do not lose the last vestiges of power we have. The reason why Ted Heath took us into Europe in the first place was because he saw that Britain's power and Britain's access had gone. People can talk about, oh, let's go back to the Commonwealth. Well, let me tell you, when they say the Commonwealth, they mean the white Commonwealth. That has gone. Canada is tied with the United States in the NAFTA type of agreement and its trans-border movements. It's sorted itself out. It doesn't look to the UK as a main ally. It doesn't listen to what the UK does. Yes, the Queen may be head of state, but that's about it. Frankly, the Australians have tied themselves up in that region of Asia. And they are tied, they're happy to sit next to and try and get close to the Chinese as much as they can within that sphere of influence, with New Zealand. So that's those two. South Africa has gone on its own way. The rest of the Commonwealth sees Britain as now and then useful, but doesn't particularly give Britain any greater bargaining powers. If you look at the Indians, they aren't particularly working closer with Britain than anybody else. In fact, their interest is to work within the region and make themselves a superpower regionally and beyond. So we're fooling ourselves if we think that there's some massive pot out there open for us to run into. We're losing our opportunities. The EU sees the rest of the world as opportunities just the same way as we do. It knows it has to push out to the rest of the world, and it is doing so. It is making agreements with the countries that are beginning to matter. Just the Japanese agreement has been made recently, looking for agreements with South Korea, looking for agreements with Canada and various other places. So those agreements were being made anyway. We just had to take a stronger position in manufacturing to take advantage of those positions. We haven't done that. So we'll be all the poorer outside of the EU than we would be within it. This is just one spook's opinion.